begin where we'd started yesterday, taking a look at the review of what we'd done up top. And again, if you're going to go half in, half out, or compete with me and somebody else in your ear, again, that's a consequence, that's a choice you're making. I'm not going to bail you out later.
Sorry, yeah. I forgot to pull it out.
So, for right now, just a reminder up at the top, because I'm sure most of you at one time or another have seen the diamonds in action. And basically all it is I have two numbers. Up the one at the top I'm trying to multiply, and at the bottom add to figure out what the two numbers on the side are going to be. Personally, to me, it's easier to do the multiplying part and then figure out the addition part later. But again, normally what I do, especially if I'm not sure on something, is I jump in and I just write down the possibilities of that number being able to multiply. So if I'm not sure, now 8 I know is kind of a bad example because most of us, can figure out 8. But if I couldn't, I just go find 8 in my chart and I can figure out, well, it's 1 times 8, or here's 8, it's 2 times 4, and I can jot those combinations down, because how that can help me is when I sit there then and write down the combos, when I get down here to add, well, 1 and 8 I can't add up to get 6. I can't add, I can't subtract. It won't work. But 2 and 4, if I add up 2 and 4, I get to 6. So it lets me know those are the two numbers on the side, and then the sign, thank you. And then the signs, I just take care of knowing, well, it's negative and negative to get me negative 6. And I work it out that way.
So you can use the chart?
Yeah, the chart absolutely can be helpful on this. So like for instance, let's jump to another one that's done on here, but how this would work. Let's say I was dealing with negative 28 and negative 12. Well, maybe I'm not sure of every possible combination that multiplies to 28. So again, I'd take the chart and I'd go looking wherever I see a 28. So I see 2 times 14 is 28. Well, here's another 28. 4 times 7. So what I do is I list them. 1 times 28, 2 times 14, 4 times 7. And once I have those, then my job becomes which pair, if I add or subtract, depending on signs, gets me to negative 12. Well, 1 and 28, I'm not adding and subtracting that and getting to 12. It's not going to happen. 2 and 14, I'm like, well, I can't add, but 14 minus 2 is 12. So then I start going, okay, 14 and 2. How do I figure out the signs? Well, if it's multiplying to a negative, one has to be positive, one has to be negative. But when I add them up, if I want to be negative, the bigger number has to be negative. So there's a lot of problem solving going on here whenever you're doing any of these. But it's going to be true, and it works every time. That's the thing that's nice about this. So like if I'm to 4, maybe I know that 4 times 6 is 24, but I can't think of anything else that is. So I start looking for 24s, and I'm like, oh, 2 times 12 is 24. I hadn't thought about that one. I knew 4 times 6, though, and I could use the chart for that. So I start to write these down. I go, okay, 24. I've got 4 and 6. I knew that. I always have 1 in the number. Okay, that's always an option. And then I also found in the chart that 2 and 12 would work. Now again, if you can do this mentally and compare numbers out, that's awesome. Okay, go ahead and do that. But if not, this is a good option for you. And then again, I go through, I'm trying to find 2 that add up to 14. Well, 4 and 6, that doesn't add up to 14. 1 and 24, okay, that's not going to add up to 14. Ooh, 2 and 12. 2 plus 12 is 14. And I put those two numbers in on the side, and they multiply to 24, but they add up to 14. Hey, sweet, this works. So let's try that with one more of these. We'll try that with 5, and then we'll show you how this actually can be used for what we're up to here. All right. So here, the number on top is what I'm looking for the multiply part of. So maybe I know, okay, 1 and 18, all right. Oh, what else? What else? And I look at the chart, or I kind of think about it for a minute, and I go, okay, 2 times 9 is 18. So is 3 times 6. So again, I go through looking, can I add or subtract to make this work? Because I notice, with this being a negative number, that one of my numbers will have to be negative and one's going to have to be positive. I know that. So I'm like 18 and 1, can I make that 17? Yeah, I can actually. Okay, if I want it to be positive 17, the bigger number needs to be positive. So 18 and negative 1. Negative 1 times positive 18 is negative 18. Negative 1 plus 18 is 17. And I've got it. Do I have to draw out a diamond when I'm doing the factoring? No. Okay? Because I'll show you how the diamonds kind of intertwine with the factoring now that we've kind of gone over some of those a little bit more. So if I'm going to factor, okay, I can make a diamond. Okay, this is optional. Step 1's optional. And then I'm going to make 2 sets of parentheses. X goes first, or whatever the variable is. And then the numbers from the sides of the diamond go after, and I'm finished. So, what we're going to do here is, I'll do the first one with the diamond, then I'll show you how you can do it without it. So the number on the end always goes up top, and it's going to be my multiply number. The number in the middle with my variable, in this case it's n, always goes on the bottom, and that's going to be what we're going to add up to. Now again, it's the multiply number that the chart can help me with, that a calculator can help me with, whatever. I'm going to try and figure out 2 numbers that multiply to 16, but they're going to add up to 8. So if I'm not sure, I would go into the chart and I'd look for every pair of numbers that could possibly multiply to get to 16, and then just start working my way down. 1 plus 16, 8? Nope. 2 plus or minus 8 gets me 8? Nope.
4 and 4.
4 and 4 does. And I don't have to worry about signs because everything's positive this time. Okay? So those are my 2 numbers that I'm going to use. And then to write down my answer, I always put 2 sets of parentheses. That's right. And if you used x instead of n, I don't care. But whatever your variable is, we put that first. And then we just put these numbers. And since they're both positive, I just put pluses with both. And that would be my factored form. Because if I were to FOIL this or box this back out, I'd get back to the original problem. You're like, well, why do I want to do that? Because it allows us to factor them down and find out solutions, which is what we're going to be working on next. So that's how these are going to work. But there's little things that I've got to watch for. So like, for instance, if we bump over to 11, again, multiply to get the number in the end, add to get the number in the middle. Exactly. With 14, my first option is always 1 in the number, and that does work sometimes. But otherwise, I could use 2 and 7, and I notice, well, 2 and 7 can get me to 9. So here's what I know, though. And again, I have to be a little bit like a detective with this. If 2 numbers multiply to get a positive, I have 1 of 2 options. They're either both positive or they're both negative. Well, since I see when I add them up they're going to be negative, okay, I know they both have to be negative. And I just figured out that 2 and 7, I owe somebody $2. I borrow 7 more, I owe them 9. Good. Negative times negative is positive. Okay, so those are my 2 numbers. Again, start with your variable. If you use x every time, I'm not going to complain. That's fine. And then just take the numbers from the sides of your diamond. Yeah, when I'm making the parentheses right, I'm just looking for that second part in each of those is what I'm trying to do. And again, I can do this without the diamond as well, though. If you're visual and you like seeing everything and that helps it to click, great. Otherwise, here's your other option. If you don't want to have to draw a diamond, I still can make myself a little note. I'm multiplying to get the number on the end, and I'm adding to get the number in the middle. Okay? So I look through and I'm like, okay, I still might want to make a chart with this though. But it's 32, there's a lot of numbers in the chart that work with 32. Because I'm starting to look through and I'm like, okay, let's see. 8 and 4. I know 1 and 32. I know 8 and 4. Well, let's see if either of those work before we start looking for any more here. Does 1 plus 32 get me to 12? No. Does 4 plus 8 get me to 12? Yeah. Okay, and they're both positive. So at this point, I could make my parentheses, put my x in first, and then the positive 4, and I always have to put the plus or minus in, and the plus 8, and I'm ready to roll. So again, it's just a process of basically getting your multiplication and your addition facts down a little bit. All right, one more on this side, then I want to do a little bit of play on the other side here. 13. We're going to multiply to try and get 9. We want to add to get negative 10. Now that might seem strange at first, but stick with me. So 9, I don't have a lot of options. What are my options on numbers to multiply to get 9?
3.
Okay, 3 and 3, or our favorite, 1 in the number. Well, let's see. 3 and 3 going to get me to 10? No. Can 1 and 9 get me to 10?
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm like, all right. That's right, because I look and I'm like, ooh, it's got to add to a negative, but multiply to a positive. So again, it tells me it's positive, positive, or it's negative, negative. Well, since that's negative, it's negative, negative. And we said 1 and 9 work. That's how I get to the answer.
-1, -9.
Negative 1 and negative 9. Because they add up to negative 10, but they multiply to get positive 9. It's got to cover both things. If it covers both things, we're in good shape. Actually, there's one other one I see I want to do. Yes, sir?
So it's just like X up there.
Yeah, we're doing the exact same thing. I was just telling people you can either, if you want to do the diamond with it, and then find the numbers in the sides and those are the ones that go in, that's a perfectly good way to do it. But if some people don't like making the diamond, you can just look at the two numbers and know those two things and do the same thing. Yep, absolutely. So like for instance on 9, let's jump back to the diamond here for a second.
I have a question. What is an exponent of?
An exponent where?
Okay, so like x to the second power.
Uh-huh.
That.
Well, for the ones that we're always going to do, they're always just going to be squared and x and a number. Yeah, they're not going to change it all on us. So here, we'd multiply to get 20. We'd add to get negative 9. So again, before I start, I should know what signs I'm working with. Negative. Because if we multiply to get a positive, again, I only have two choices. They're both positive or they're both negative. But if I'm adding to get a negative number,
-4 and -5.
awesome. Because if I start jotting down all my options here for 20, and I get that done, and then again, I start looking. 1 and 20, I'm not getting to 9. 2 and 10, I'm not getting to 9. 4 and 5, oh, I can get to 9. 4 and 5. And then just make my parentheses, because I can't just leave the diamond. That doesn't quite do it. Whatever my variable is, and then just jot down the numbers from the sides. Okay. And I'm good. Now, one last thing that I do want to do on this particular note sheet. You'll notice, and I'm going to laugh when I flip over and there's nothing there. Oh, good. Okay. Let me flip it over here. Is I do want to take a moment to be able to do some review things from what we were dealing with in our last part that we were working with. Some of the things that were on the quiz or type things. For instance, on 16, I want to take out the greatest common factor and then figure out what W actually equals. Yep, so we always start with the number. If I'm looking for the biggest number that goes into 4 and 28, I hopefully will notice that that's going to be 4. Because if I would look back at the chart, if I wasn't sure, there's 28, 4 goes in, okay? So, if I take a 4, do both my terms have a W? Yeah. But I always take the smaller of the two. So 4w to the first, okay, not the second. Always the smaller one. And then, right, it basically becomes doing the distributive property backwards. 4 times -1 is -4. If I have 1w and I need 2, I need 1 more. And I can put the 1 there if I want to. 4 times what gets me to 28? 7. But I notice I already have the 1w, so I don't need that. Okay? But I'm not quite done, because that equals 0 tells me any term that has a w. So 4w, we set that equal to 0.
Could you do like -4 times 1 minus 7?
Yes, you absolutely could. That's a good question. If you happen to factor out a negative here instead, which you could, that would just change the signs on both of these, but I'd still get the same answer at the end. So yep, that's absolutely an okay way to do things. So once I take each of those parts that has a w, set them equal to 0, now it just works like an equation would. What's the opposite of multiplying something by 4? You're right. I was going to say, right, I'm going to get 0 when I divide by 4. So that's one of my answers. And then right here, I want to get the plus 7 out of there first, so I'd -7. And then right, since I'm multiplying by -1, this isn't adding, okay? I'm going to divide by -1. Because it's not w minus 1, it's -1 times w. And negative divided by negative is positive. That's how problems like this work when you're trying to factor out a greatest common factor. Let's hit up one more of these. Let's do 17, because that's a little tricky yet. 6 and 33, biggest number that goes in. Okay. 3, because if I look, I'm like, okay, there's 6. Oh, there's 33. Okay, they're both in my row with 3. So, pull a 3 out. I see p's in both, but again, I want the one with the smaller exponent, so p to the first. And now I just start trying to build the rest of my problem. 3 times what gets to 6? 2. I got 1p. I need to get to 2, so I use 1 more. 3 times 11 is 33. And if I wasn't sure, I can use the chart. I could even, if I wanted to, do 33 divided by 3 in the calculator, and it'd tell me the 11. But I already have 1p, so I don't need any more. And so my only job then at that point is, again, to take each piece of this that has a p and set it equal to 0. And usually what will happen is one of my answers typically will be 0 most of the time. And then again, the other one, just solve it like you would any two-step equation. And I don't care whether you go to a decimal or a fraction. To me, if I get something with a fraction and it doesn't break down nice, I'm just going to leave it. But that may help some of you if you either haven't taken the quiz yet, or maybe you took it and it kind of went haywire on you, especially on the back. This may be something that might be able to help you out a little bit if you go and look to redo that here sometime in the next week. Yeah, I was going to say, some of you haven't taken it yet. So if you haven't here in the next couple of days, make sure that gets done. Those of you that have, you've got all the way through next week to retake if you want to. I've always got my times up over on the board there that you can pop in and see me. There's a lot of them. So take advantage of that and use the rest of your time to work on the worksheet number 1, I think we've called it.